They said I was nothing after I spent every cent on a $1,100 cottage by a forgotten lake. I traded family dinners for creaking floorboards and peeling paint. But when the world thought I'd vanished, they came knocking, asking for a key to the very home they'd laughed at. That's when I realized silence can be the sharpest weapon. Stay tuned to discover how I turned their pity into proof and reclaimed everything they tried to erase. My name is Alara. I was 25 when I learned that love in my family came with terms, unspoken but carved into every glance, every ask, every silence. The illusion of closeness had always been conditional. I just didn't see it clearly until the night they asked me to give, and I said no. It was meant to be a celebration. Candles flickered on the dining table, cutlery gleamed under warm light, and smiles passed like currency among people who knew exactly how to perform belonging. Everyone had something to toast. My sister Vivian's latest product line, my father's new partnership deal, my mother's grant renewal for her wellness foundation. The air was thick with pride, with curated joy, with expectation. And then came the moment they turned to me. They expected the wire transfer had gone through, that I had once again silently funded what they deemed necessary. But I hadn't. I had done something unscripted, something selfish in their eyes. I had used my savings to buy a house, not a sleek condo or a practical apartment, a wreck, a fixer-upper by a forgotten lake. But it was mine. The mood shifted instantly. Their disappointment didn't come in shouting or accusations. It came in glances, in the sound of wine glasses being placed too carefully back on the table, in the way no one asked another question. I understood without a word that I had failed the test. Whatever it was, I had stepped out of the role they had written for me without telling the director. Later that evening, the message came. I was removed from the shared calendar. The words were short, clinical, designed to cut without leaving a wound visible to outsiders. Plans had changed. I was no longer expected at Easter. There was no warmth, no confusion, not even anger, just deletion. I stared at the message for a long time, not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. I finally saw the shape of the family I'd spent my whole life trying to fit into. I had always been the shadow, the understudy, the helper. The moment I stopped being useful, I stopped being included. That night, I packed a duffel bag and left the city before dawn. The house I bought was waiting for me, neglected and ugly and exactly what I needed. I had spent years trying to earn a seat at a table that was never mine. Now, I was going to build one. The road to the cottage wound through silent pine trees and forgotten back roads, the kind of place GPS only half believes in. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as if protesting my arrival. Everything about the drive felt like a metaphor. The isolation, the uneven path, the sense that once I crossed a certain point, there was no going back. When the house finally came into view, it looked even worse than I remembered from the listing. The porch sagged under the weight of its own neglect, and the windows stared out blankly like eyes that hadn't seen joy in years. Paint peeled in long, tired strips, and a shutter hung crooked, like a loose tooth. But it was mine. I stepped out of the car and felt the cold bite through my jacket. Rain threatened from above, and the air smelled of wet bark and mildew. I took a foldable chair from the trunk and set it beside the porch, the only spot that looked stable enough to trust. Sitting down, I let the silence settle around me like an old coat. It wasn't the kind of quiet that made you feel alone. It was the kind that asked nothing of you, that simply let you exist. Inside, the house creaked like it was waking up from a long sleep. There was no heat, no electricity yet, and the floor sagged in the corners. But I moved through it room by room, not cataloging flaws, but claiming space. Each cracked tile and loose board was a small rebellion. This place wasn't perfect, but neither was I. And finally, I didn't have to apologize for that. I unpacked a single curtain, a faded blue floral one I'd saved from college. Hanging it was an act of quiet defiance. It fell twice before it held. Still, I stood back and admired it as if it were silk. That night, curled on a blanket on the floor, I sifted through an old box of birthday cards. Most were generic, signed with the same "Love you girls" in my mother's cursive. But one stood out, the one that praised only Vivian. My name had been added in pencil, barely visible, like a footnote. A name easily erased. I didn't cry. Not then. I just folded the card in half, slipped it back into the box, and stared at the ceiling. I had left the table. And this broken, empty house, was the first place I'd ever been that didn't ask me to shrink. I hadn't expected Vivian to show up, not after the silence she and the rest of my family had wrapped around me like a shroud the moment I stepped out of line. But 3 weeks after I moved into the cottage, she appeared, unannounced and unnervingly calm, on my porch just after dawn, when the lake still wore its mist like a veil. She stood there like someone arriving for a spa appointment, not a reconciliation. Her coat was cream-colored silk, cinched perfectly at the waist. Her heels sank into the damp gravel, but she didn't seem to notice. Large sunglasses shielded her face, but I could still sense the performance in her posture, the calculated tilt of her chin, the way she didn't wait for an invitation before stepping inside. Her presence filled the space in a way that made it smaller. The cottage, fragile and still in recovery, seemed to shrink around her. Without asking, she began rearranging my kitchen. She set up a ring light in front of the window, casting a harsh white glow over the chipped counter and mismatched cabinets. The items I used daily, a chipped mug, an old kettle, the dented bread tin, were pushed aside and replaced with neatly staged props: cartons of oat milk, a clean jar of granola, a lit candle that smelled too expensive for the room it occupied. And then she began to speak. Softly, sweetly, into her phone, her voice laced with faux affection, a practiced tenderness meant for an audience, not for me. She described my life, this life, as a healing journey, a rustic adventure into self-discovery. Her followers, I imagined, were eating it up. They didn't know this was the first place I'd ever lived where I wasn't required to apologize for existing. I stood at the edge of the room, silent. Not frozen. Just watching her. Turn my worn-out reality into a narrative she could monetize, a backdrop for her compassion cosplay. She wasn't here for me. She was here for her brand. The live stream didn't last long, but the consequences echoed louder than her curated tone ever could. The next morning, I saw my own face, half-shadowed, weary, on a fundraiser banner online. "Help my sister rebuild," it read. Organizer, Vivienne Langston, over $17,000 raised. The campaign page painted a picture of resilience, of a once stable sister fallen on hard times, of a benevolent sibling stepping in to rally support. Except it wasn't true. None of it had been with my knowledge. None of it with my consent. The comments were glowing. "You're such an amazing sister." "I donated $50. She's lucky to have you." "I hope she finds herself again." No one asked whether I wanted to be found. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt invaded. My life, twisted and cropped, turned into a pity performance for strangers. She had taken my silence and painted it as fragility, my choice to leave as collapse, my independence as dysfunction. I didn't scream. I documented. Screenshots, timestamps, recordings of the live stream. Every penny she collected traced to her business account under the guise of goodwill. Not to punish her, but to protect myself. To prepare. Then came the message. A man named Theo, paralegal, Colorado bar, certified. He had stumbled on the campaign and saw the same red flags I did. He asked one question. "You didn't authorize this, did you?" I typed one word. "No," and something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger, not really. It was steadiness, a grounding I hadn't felt in weeks. I silenced my phone, opened my laptop, and began the quiet work of gathering truth. Not for revenge, not for spectacle, but to dismantle, piece by piece, the stage she had built with my suffering as the set. 2 days after the fundraiser went live, I stopped waiting to feel guilty. It never came. Instead, I felt a quiet steadiness begin to root inside me, like something that had been holding its breath for years had finally exhaled. Theo and I never spoke on the phone. We kept it simple. Texts, documents, scanned forms. He didn't ask me how I felt. He asked for screenshots, dates, bank transfers. He never made me feel like a victim. He treated me like someone reclaiming control, and that mattered more than I realized. With his help, I built a paper trail, quietly, methodically. Screenshots of the live stream, logs of the donations, statements, proof. Each file a small piece of my story, finally being written by me. And when the cease and desist was ready, I printed it on thick, crisp paper. I folded it 3 times and slid it into a manila envelope. No dramatics, just clarity. Vivienne had been teasing her next live event, a massive Q&A and product reveal. A healing space, she said. A moment of truth. I knew exactly when to send the envelope. On the day of the event, I didn't feel nervous. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, drinking lukewarm coffee and listening to the old fridge hum in the background. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't pace. I just waited for the delivery confirmation. At 6:03 p.m., the message came. Delivered. I opened her live stream on my phone. There she was, perfectly styled in beige tones, soft lighting, wrapping her like a curated hug. Her voice, as smooth as ever, floated through the screen. Healing starts with honesty, she said, with family, with compassion. Right on cue, someone stepped into the frame and handed her the envelope. She blinked. Just once. Her smile faltered. Not enough for most to notice, but I saw it. She held the envelope like it might burn her. Said something about a small interruption. Tried to keep going, but the chat had already noticed. What was that? Why does she look so nervous? Is this part of the show? And then, black screen. No goodbye. No wrap-up. Just static silence. I didn't cheer. I didn't post about it. I didn't even save the footage. I just closed my phone and finished my coffee. That night, Reddit threads started circulating. Might cease and deceive, mine sister scam. Letter bombed. They didn't know my name. And that was okay, because I knew it. And I had written it back into the story with my own hands. No theatrics, no public war, just boundaries, just truth. For the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt intact. I was never invited to the gala, but I saw the announcement. Vivienne, center stage again, this time promising a night of healing and sisterhood in downtown Los Angeles. At first, I planned to ignore it. The cease and desist had done its job. The live stream had ended in silence. I thought that would be enough. But the night before the event, brushing my teeth under flickering bathroom light, I caught my reflection. For the first time in years, I looked myself in the eye and didn't look away. That was reason enough. I arrived at the gala in a simple navy dress. No makeup, no theatrics. Just me, just truth. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with curated elegance. Pastel banners, crystal glasses, smiles stretched across faces trained for cameras. I took a seat near the back, behind a pillar where no spotlight would ever reach. I didn't come to interrupt. I came to witness. Vivienne floated from table to table in champagne silk, laughter trailing behind her like perfume. If she noticed me, she didn't show it. The lights dimmed. A slideshow began, full of staged images. Donations, community hugs, faux humility. Then, something changed. A slide flickered on screen, white background, black text, a message thread. Let her rot in that dump. She's good for sympathy points. Keep the cameras low, show the cracks. Gasps scattered across the room like broken glass. Vivienne froze. And then the most unexpected thing happened. Aunt Melrose, listed on the program as a guest speaker, walked up to the stage. But she didn't praise Vivienne. She told the truth, that some families don't scream their cruelty, they edit it. that silence can be a scalpel, that sometimes erasure looks like smiles. Then she stepped down, walked past the glittering tables, and hugged me. Full, steady, like she meant it. Vivian fled seconds later. No farewell, no facade. Just retreat. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because that night I didn't reclaim revenge. I reclaimed presence, not through spectacle, but through stillness. I wasn't erased anymore. I existed, fully, quietly. And that was everything. Morning light poured through the cottage windows, no longer shy, no longer filtered through cracked panes and dust. The house, though still imperfect, had transformed, not with money or magic, but with presence, with care, with me. It had been a month since the gala, since Vivian's image slipped, mid-spotlight, and shattered. I never followed the headlines. I didn't read the Reddit threads or watch the replays. I didn't need to. I wasn't interested in punishment. I was building something. The porch had been sanded and painted. The windows recaulked. The floors, once groaning under the weight of neglect, now creaked like they were settling in. I planted basil in a rusted tin and smiled when the wind carried the scent through the kitchen. The house no longer whispered survival. It spoke of peace. On a Saturday morning, I hosted lemonade for the neighborhood cleanup. Chalk drawings covered the walkway. Kids laughed as they scribbled suns and spirals across my steps. A stranger asked if I was the homeowner. I nodded without flinching. That was new. My phone buzzed mid-afternoon. I nearly ignored it. But the name on the screen froze me. Vivienne. Things have been rough. Can we crash with you a bit? Just until we figure things out. No apology, no explanation. Just the assumption that I was still that person. The one who absorbs, forgives, makes room, even when there's none left. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked back inside and looked around. The wildflowers in a glass jar. The mug Aunt Melrose gifted me. The quiet. This was mine. I picked up the phone and typed only what needed to be said. There's no space for lies here anymore. And sent it. Outside, laughter rose again. Someone had spilled water and turned the sunlight into glitter. I stepped onto the porch, barefoot, and let the moment wrap around me. This house, this once crumbling, unwanted place, was never my escape plan. It was my beginning. I stopped knocking on locked doors the day I realized I could build one of my own, and behind it, finally, was a life that belonged only to me.